Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Barbarian and this is a new video covering Victoria 3. Now, if you were wondering where I was, I basically after ModCon took a bit of a break and then I focused on After Effects and Premiere because I'm working on a new, for the channel new video format, and I'm very excited because that is very soon going to become a bit of a staple of the channel, I feel. Until then, you know, there is going to be a bit of time, a couple of days probably, but we are back with the Dev Diaries now. That is, Victoria 3 is now continuing to do Dev Diaries, so there were I think 2 or 3 weeks where there just weren't any. We're going to go over some stuff that came out in that time, so they still drip fed us basically some information. We're going to take a look at that, and yeah, just so you know, if you want to skip that, if you've already seen all the information that came with the summer teasers or all the information that was interesting, then you can go via the chapters that are, you know, will be in the video much like they are here. They will be there for this video as well, and you can go check it out. You know, you can just go to what is only the Dev Diary information, or you can just stick, you know, with the video and watch it all. So in this video there was a lot of really interesting stuff. They explained a lot, and then they had these images, and they uploaded every single one of these images right here so that we can take a look at and edit and, you know, see whether we like what we see. Now, this isn't new, this isn't all that interesting either. This is also not new. This is pretty cool because what we see right here is Maghrebi Sunni laborers, so that could be Tunisians, that could be Morocco, that could be Algeria. Algeria was actually still partially free, although of course this, you know, could also be within the French colonies that existed in 1836 on the coastline. What we see here and why I think it is cool is that you can actually see the impact of the lifestyle on a pop. So right here, these pops are starving, you can see it right there. They are laborers, they work in the food industry, and it is pretty ironic that they work in the food industry and they are starving. But what we can see right here is the effect on them. You can see that they are very thin. They have very cool clothing, if I may just say that. I really hope that they're going to be so many clothing assets in this. This is not even comparable to CK3. I mentioned this before. And we also already know that the community flavor pack will be a thing for Victoria 3 as well, so that we can hope for many more clothings. But the reality of this is that, for example, a worker in Bavaria in 1836 would be wearing different clothings compared to a worker in 1920. Whether that is something that the game is actually reflecting, I don't know, but I have to tell you, I didn't even expect that they would have these very cool outfits for the Maghrebi Sunni laborers right here. So that is already much more content than I assumed. Again, I wanna keep my own enthusiasm a bit back because I'll be honest with you, looking at how many assets are necessary to cover the entire world from 1836 to 1936, you know, the samurai, or rather the officer class, the soldier class in Japan, for example, changing from traditional garbs all the way to modern uniforms. You know, it's not that likely that we're actually going to see all of that, but, you know, maybe they're going to talk about that in the future. But again, I like it that we now have this sort of depiction of, yeah, these people are having a tough life because they are, as it says, starving. Now, right here we have different groups. This is the detailed list. The overview, from as I understand it, is the one that has the pie charts. We're going to take a look at the pie charts in a second. You can see we have a population of 34 million, and the interesting thing about this one is that I believe this is maybe census suffrage. So what it means is that basically the higher your social rank, for example, if you're a clerk, then you are higher than a peasant. That is how much your vote is actually worth, and we can see that right here as well. There are 708,000 clerks, and they have almost 700,000 political strength, whereas the peasants don't even have a 6.43 million, despite being 22 million peasants. That is quite nice. I like that. I also will say that I think it might be better, instead of depicting the absolute political strength number, to instead go and depict the percentage of the total pie, because of course, you know, all of this is basically an absolute number, and with that absolute number then says, hey, this is the power these people actually have in this country. As it stands, you would have to do the math yourself. You can look at the pie chart, I guess, but I think if you had a percentage, that would be even better. Now, right here, this is beautiful. This is the population in Austria. What can we glean from this? So, this is the literacy rate, I would assume. Or let's start on the left side. Of course, this is what type they are. This is where they work. These laborers are unemployed. This is the culture. So we got North Italian. They're all North Italian in this list. I assume maybe it is even just, you know, filtered out after North Italian. Then right here we have the religion. And you can see that there is a difference here. Because what we can see right here, I believe this is what that signifies. These are Jewish, so they are of Jewish religion. They are not Catholic, meaning that they are not accepted. I'm pretty sure that this means that there is no persecution against, I mean, they're Catholic. The Austrians were Catholic, you know, of course. But on the other hand, this one right here has persecution. It even looks like a boot kicking them out. Oh, no, actually, sorry. My apologies. This actually looks like a boot standing on somebody. So that is definitely persecution. Now, the population here is also tiny, and there, it appears to be shrinking, which isn't that important because it's a tiny population as is. But here, for example, the laborers over there in the glassworks, they are also shrinking, for example. Now, this is program art, if you've ever seen it. Anything that is basically pink is program art. R and L, I don't know what that means. Then we have the literacy rate, at least that is what I would suspect to be the literacy rate. You can see the academics are much more literate compared to, for example, the laborers, the officers even, and anybody in between. This right here, I'm not sure. I would assume that this shows the people... Oh, right. I assume that this shows the full population. So these are the... Honestly, No. This is the political power. This shows the political strength. Right, here we go, there we go. You can see right here that some are following the interest groups of the industrialists. These are disenfranchised because, again, they are being persecuted. Then we have the armed forces, the intelligentsia, and we have the politically inactive, which are currently in Victoria 2 terms not conscious enough to go out, basically, and be a part of the political process. They're not disenfranchised, but they also don't really want to participate. So this means that 10,000 clerks have the power of 9,000 on a political strength level. And then on the other hand, for example, let's see, yeah, we got some laborers here. 35,000 laborers only have 10.5k. Yeah, so this is exactly what it means. And then we have the standard of living. I assume this means basically what their wealth is. Yeah, pretty cool. I think this is a really nice way to show these stats. I can't really complain about these at all. It shows where they work. I wish, I guess if you like hover over this, if you click it, then it brings you to this actual location. But, it would be nice to maybe see a state attached with it as is. Pretty cool. I like the screen. Can't really say anything against it. Here we have the pie charts. Very, very cool. So pie charts are coming back. And pie charts are not the favorites of many people. And I know, listen, if you go into the comments and if you're ready to die for pie charts, I understand that. But I do think that it needs to be mentioned that on an academic level, pie charts are not really something that is being used anymore, in a great variety. It can be used in certain sections, but primarily pie charts are in a position where there are other forms of graphical depiction that work better, right? That is something that I think is something that needs to be acknowledged, but what also needs to be acknowledged and respected, and I say that as somebody that loves Victoria 2 and Victoria 1, so Vicky 2 and Ricky, I like pie charts. I like pie charts primarily because, especially in Victoria 2, of course, you go, you look at it, and you love it. Because that is, the pops are right in front of you. You can see at least the majority, you can see the plurality that is going on there, even if, of course, look at this. This section of the pie chart is basically useless, but it's still interesting, right? And that is essentially why pie charts are so nice. They are not the greatest to give you information, but that's why you have this, but they are in a position where they do make it so that people feel immersed, people like it, and I think that is a good, that is a great piece of news that they are in the game. We have the population here, so that means the peasants, laborers, and clergymen. Everybody else that is, here isn't really listed. So we got these, and then this yellow strip right there. And then we see next to it, and that is quite interesting, the political strength. I assume if you hover over it, it will actually show to you what exactly that is. But I really like that because it does show the discrepancy immediately between the peasants' population and the political strength. Between, for example, the aristocrat population, which isn't even really visible, and then the political strength of the aristocrats. I think that is excellent. This is a really good depiction to show you how much population you have, but then which population matters. Does it give you all of the information? It does not, but again, that's why you have this. While on the other hand, it does give you enough information for a quick glimpse. Then we got the cultures here, and the cultures made me wonder. The cultures really, really made me wonder. I tweeted about this as well. They have Austrian. So they have North Italian, very reminiscent of Victoria 2, where it was North Italian and South Italian, but they now have Austrian here. And I am not sure what to think of that, because as a culture, Austrian was and is distinct, no doubt about it. And within Austria, if you want to break it down even further, you have different cultures as well. But the question that I here have, if you want to go and separate Austrian from South German, so in Victoria 2 it's North German and South German, if you want to do that, it's a bit weird to me. Because Austrians are a part of South German, and in the South German group, you have Austrians, you have Bavarians, Franconians, Swabians, and so on, right? So I was looking at this and I wasn't really sure. I didn't really get a response from the devs either, which is fair at the end of the day. I can't expect a response for everything. But I hope that you understand where I am coming from, that basically, I hope this means that we have Bavarian, Franconian, Brandenburg, etc., Saxon, and whatnot. But if it was North German, South German, and Austrian, I would be confused. That's really all I can say. Other than that, still pretty cool. You can see the Austrians, of course, having more power than, you know, they should have when it comes to just the size of the population. The Hungarians have a little bit less, although, honestly, the Hungarians, like, feel pretty similar in their pie share here. Whether that is true, I don't know, because they all get slightly smaller in their political power. And then you have some representation here as well for the other groups. Interestingly enough, if we look at this right here, honestly, it matches it quite well. It does seem like the Austrians are a bit more powerful than they ought to be, but at the end of the day, the rest of the population here seems fine. And then, of course, we got Catholic, Orthodox, and I assume Protestant, and maybe this is the Jewish population. That is quite interesting, of course, as well. We see that Catholicism has, as the state religion, has a bigger touch on the political strength. Pretty cool. I like it. Authority. Not really that interesting. We already looked at this. We already talked about this as well. You can suppress the intelligentsia. So all of these things that you can do with authority are sort of pet projects of your ruler. I like this mechanic after it was explained. Before that, I was very, very skeptical, and then it was explained in detail, and actually I'm a fan of it. I think that this is a better approach than the national focuses. I'll be honest with you, this was pretty standard. Now, right here, we got, I believe this to be Iran. We got the government administration in Iraq Yemi. And maybe it's not Iran. Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't want to say talk nonsense here. Iraq makes me doubt, but who knows? This is a government administration. Of course, we can see here that they created urbanization and bureaucracy. So they give you some of the things that you need to actually pass some of this stuff. You got it right here, so that you can maintain all the states. Quite nice, but we've already seen that. Here we have Nikolai Romanov. You can see also his identity, or rather his character, arrogant, cruel, and a political operator. Good to know that what all of these are. He is a member of the interest group. That is very, very cool. He is, of course, the ruler. He's 40, Orthodox traditionalist, and he has decent popularity, I guess. Is this programmer art neutral? pH? Are they doing the pH values here? Who knows, but that's pretty neat. I like the personification here. The influence, of course, of a ruler is fairly limited to a degree. It's just limited to this, basically, and what interest group they are a part of, but I like the idea of having a face to it. We talked about this as well. It could also open the door for the game to actually simulate things like assassinations and have it not just be an event. There would be an actual person that gets assassinated. I think that would be quite cool. Here we got New York. Urban center size is 8. You can see all of these buildings. Pretty cool. It seems to be in a pretty good condition as well economically, which you can immediately tell. At least, you know, I mean, maybe this isn't even outpost, I'm not sure. By looking at the fact that all of these have huge cash reserves. This could also just be at the start of the game. It looks like they're all making money either way, but yeah, that seems like New York is prospering, which of course makes sense. Now here we got steel, and there are, if I'm not mistaken here, let me just skip through this. Oh man, there's some interesting ones that I haven't even really looked at. Now here we have the steel mines of New York. You can see that they are doing quite fine. They are making money. They are also having a bunch of cash reserves. You can see it right here. The weekly taxes are coming in for you as well. So I assume that this, for example, the weekly taxes would be calculated against the subsidies. But in this case, again, there are no subsidies from the looks of it. They are purchasing up goods. They're paying wages. They're using infrastructure. And then they go and they deliver this steel. Makes perfect sense. I really actually like this screen because it is very clear about what is happening. The production methods we covered in a different dev diary, but they're going to come back, believe me. And now look at this. I like this list a lot. It shows you these urban buildings, and then you can open this even further to look at where the food industries are and which state they are and so on. You can do that with rural and with the development buildings as well. This is also simply a good interface. It also shows which one is using this one, or how many production methods are in use currently in these different buildings. Honestly, I like these screens. Now, about the aesthetics we can fight, I don't necessarily love them. But I think that the UI basic design is something that definitely works. Right over here we got the buildings, and as you can see we got the urban buildings listed like this. Also, you know, what they provide to you, of course, you know, these are taxes, this is government services and whatnot. We have the arts academy, we have the university, and then right here how many buildings we have. You could add buildings from here, so this is a bit of a macro builder. Then we got the wheat farms, of course. You see the cash reserves as well, and I mean, these don't have cash reserves because they are run by the government. That is quite cool. That is quite neat. I think these are excellent. This is a better, or this is a different way of depicting it. I think that is also really nice. And this is just Ile-de-France, actually. So, yeah, wow. That's a, that's a lot of buildings. I wonder when this is in terms of in the game. There are also 4 unemployed. And then, yeah, 47.1k peasants. That's a lot of buildings, honestly. That's quite impressive. If this is the GameStar, that would be nice. Did they just change it here? That's what it means, isn't it? Isn't that interesting that you can change it here? And I assume this depicts it maybe in this way. Oh, no, wait a minute. Is this straight up just... Wait, no way. Oh, it totally is. This is just this. Oh, my God. I was blind. My apologies. So this is this screen But if you click this button, this transforms into, well, this list. I like it. Yeah, no, this is a great UI choice. Seriously, when it comes to the UI design, when it comes to CK3 in particular, I mean, I know there are more difficult UIs, and CK3 isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of things that can be altered, and they have done that, at least with a couple of steps in one of the latest patches, but I like that they give you the choice here to say, hey, how do you want to look at these buildings? Big fan. Now, right here, we got the Swedish market. Honestly, we've talked. I was, let me just say it. I was impressed with myself when I looked at the screen and I figured out how infrastructure and the market access works just from looking at it. There's honestly not that much to report here. We've seen this. The infrastructure usage is below the infrastructure, meaning that this province has, or this state has, full market access. Makes perfect sense. This shows the GDP. Actually, they did explain that. I didn't mention that when I covered this, but this does show the GDP that is contributed to the entire nation from this state. Yeah, that's pretty neat. So into the Swedish market, basically. Now here we have, building. These are the subsistence buildings. We've talked about that at length as well. This one we've also talked about. There's some interesting thing to come here. Just give me a minute. We need to be looking. Oh yeah, look at these plantations. This is quite nice. There's a lot of different potential here. We have cotton, tea, tobacco, banana, coffee, dye, opium, and rubber plantations. I'm excited to see what modders do with that as well. Stuff like Sunless Sea. That you know, those modders. I want to see the maybe an Elder Kings in this. Either way, there's a lot that can be done here, a lot that is very, very interesting, and of course these different types of plantations are quite neat. This one, yeah, again, it's quite, we've seen that before, basically. We have the workforce, what they earn, how they're doing. You can see, of course, you know, they are secure, they are affluent because they have just that much money, and then these are impoverished and struggling because their annual wage is incredibly low, but we don't really need to dissect that all that much. What I'm more interested in, we've done all of this basically already, that's not that important. What I'm more interested in is one particular thing. Let me check it. Oh yeah, here we go. So these are iron mines in Missouri, and you can now see some of the production methods side by side. Very, very cool. We got picks and shovels, so there are two available, as you can tell, picks and shovels, and atmospheric engine pump. There is, here for example, there is a greater consumption and a different output, you know, or more output coming in. Most of the time what they stated is that they wanted to limit it to the actual production quality, so how much they can produce in this place, and then also the mortality, whether it goes up or down. You can see that depicted right here. I'll be honest with you, not the biggest fan of, like, it just seems sort of messy. You know, these are very, very tiny symbols. They're going to be smaller on screen. I don't know about this one, but, you know, the idea of this is, of course, that you don't straight up have a progression to the diesel pump, because if you don't have diesel, then you can't really do this, right? If you don't have petrol, that is quite neat, but right now we got two available. We can choose between those. Then we got explosives, manual drilling, nitroglycerin, and dynamite. And you can see the difference as well in what is required. For example, it could also require a more qualified, a more educated population. And if you don't educate your population, then you might not want to be working with, you know, this sort of stuff. For example, with more complex machines. That requires a higher educated population rather than picks and shovels. I mean, everybody can, you know, shovel and use a pickaxe. Then right here we have the hand-cranked crane. So this is steam automation versus the steam donkey. As you can see right here, that needs more production in your country or in your market, because it makes it so that you need to be out there and actually need to have a steam donkey production. So for the moment, we're just going to do hand-cranked cranes. That is quite neat. Then we got the road carts or the rail transportation. I assume that this right here means that it uses up the service that the railroads provide, which is indeed transportation. So that is something that is provided by you building up your railroads more and more, meaning that sometimes you might be in a position where you need to decide which factory is allowed to use rails and which ones aren't allowed to do that. You have to do that based on the success of your location. Then right here, we have the ownership model, of course. That is the merchant guild, so that is the starting one. Then it will go to privately owned. And then, I mean, honestly, we got publicly traded. I'm still not sure how this works. These ones should be clear. This is a more socialist, more maybe anarchist or whatever point of view. The government run as well, socialist, of course, or just, you know, if you intervene into certain industry branches without being fully committed to not being a market-oriented government or society. But publicly traded is the one that interests me the most. How would a pop decide what they invest in? When can a pop invest? How can I strengthen the access of pops to invest? Because that is a big topic as well. I mean, even today, just look at retail traders and how small they are in terms of, you know, their capitalization. But that is quite neat. I, of course, you know, like that a lot. We've talked about that at length as well, though, so we don't really need to specialize it. Here we can see, you know, a lot of production methods are available. We have chosen different production methods. We see the vacancies, so this one is not fully filled. There are some, I believe, peasants that are missing from these farms. Fair enough. Yeah, we're back at the start. So let's move on. I need to close this. There we go. Let's move on to this. This was tweeted by Martin Anwar yesterday. Tomorrow, development diaries for PDX Victoria return on the subject of laws. Teaser, here's a look at most of the different forms of distribution of power that a country can have, ranging from one man, one vote, to he is the man and he has the vote. So we got autocracy, oligarchy, elder council, landed voting, wealth voting, census suffrage, and universal suffrage, and then there's something hiding down there. Who knows, maybe religious suffrage or something, I can't tell. You can also see which interest groups are approving and which ones are disapproving. Nobody's disapproving landed voting for some reason, at least from the looks of it, but yeah, nobody really wants to change the current form that is autocracy, because of course the interest groups in this realm, we have to assume maybe this is one of the classic European monarchies, right? They're not that interested in it. I will say, and this was pointed out by somebody else, this is not my idea. I don't know whether it's anywhere in here, but this is such a waste of space. Come on, man. I hate that. I really hate that. I know why it is this way, because basically they list them in this way on the level of just the policies that you have active, but man, this is hideous. There's nothing in there. Just a waste of space. Please fix. The Elder Council, very cool. I like that idea. You know, could be more tribal society oriented, could be more traditional society oriented, but you could also go and say, hey, you know what? We need an elder council that guides us through industrialization. Why not, right? This is one of those things that you can do only in Victoria, and you can do it even better in Victoria 3. And with that, let's go to the actual Dev Diary. Holy crap, 21 minutes in. My apologies for the curse, but here we are. Dev Diary 7 laws. After a couple of weeks vacation, we've now returned to our usual weekly Dev Diary schedule. Today we'll be diving deeper into Victoria's politics to talk about laws. Legal reforms in your country create different political, economic and social conditions for your pops, which over time change the fabric of your society. This change can be slow and incremental, or fast and revolutionary, sometimes literally. Of course, you can have something that is a reform, or you can have something, you know, well, that might cut your head off. So there are three major categories that have subcategories. Let's go through all of them. Power structure. These laws determine who is in control of different aspects of your country. It includes fundamental governance principles such as monarchy and parliamentary republic, which determine who your head of state is and what kind of powers they wield. Distribution of power ranges from autocracy and oligarchy through various extensions of the voting franchise all the way to universal suffrage. Citizenship and church and state laws govern which pops suffer legal discrimination in your country due to their culture or religion. The principles on which your bureaucracy run, such as hereditary or elected positions for bureaucrats, determine how expensive it is to keep track of each citizen and how much institution costs to run, but also directly benefits some groups over others. Of course, it is always a trade-off. Conscription lets you raise part of your civilian workforce as soldiers in times of war, you know, mobilization, and internal security governs how the Home Affairs anti-insurgent institutions work. So you can go and just essentially fund the Home Affairs anti-insurgent institutions and make it so that you don't need to fight a revolution. You can maybe, honestly, what I would wish from this is that you can turn a blind eye. If you as the player say, I want a revolution of, I don't know, the Jacobins, very... Victoria 2 joke, okay? It's a very bad one. But if you are looking at that, and the Jacobites are something you want to have rise up, whatever they might be called in this game, hopefully something more sensible, but maybe you can turn a blind eye to that, maybe you can even support them. I would be very interested in that. The power structure laws of a typical European nation after having made a few strides towards liberalization. I challenge this, but let's take a look at that. The numbers in green refer to the number of alternative laws currently available. We have a parliamentary republic. That is not a typical European country that has made some steps towards liberalization. We're talking about the time period in which the Holy Alliance, I believe it was called, right, between Russia, Prussia, and Austria was still full ongoing, where the Vienna Congress was still the order of the world in Europe. Being a republic was very rare. I have to guess the Dutch. You could say some city-states, I suppose. The Swiss, I suppose. I mean, I guess it's a bit different still. It's like the Confederacy, but you know, yeah, not that common. But you have some alternatives, of course, too here. Then we got the census suffrage, so the higher your social, you are in the social hierarchy, the more voting power you have. We got cultural exclusion. This one, I really hope, and this will be hand in hand with primary cultures and accepted cultures in Victoria 3. I really hope that we can decide on a per base sort of a decision-making process, so where I say, you know, these cultures are accepted, these cultures aren't accepted, maybe via culture groups, maybe via languages, maybe, you know, I don't know, but If it is just a general, hey, there is cultural exclusion, I hope that there is basically an institution that we can then utilize that says these cultures are excluded and these are not. Because, of course, for example, and it looked to me like it was fine, but in these stats that we had earlier, but for example, in Austria-Hungary, we had then after 1866, I believe it was right after 1866, right, when Austria-Hungary was actually declared rather than just Austria, we had equality between Hungary and whatnot, but many of the other minorities were not treated well. I think this is something that, you know, should be given as a choice, because that is something, of course, that did happen historically. Then church and state, freedom of conscience, that is pretty liberal. Hereditary bureaucrats, that is not very liberal. No conscription, that is very old style, not, you know, liberal or conservative, but that is basically just what armies were before they were reformed into proper mass armies. And then we have no home affairs, so this is, man, they aren't actually locking anyone up, it seems. There seems to be no secret police. There seems to be nothing going on there. Now let's talk about the economy. This set of laws define where your treasury's money comes from and how it can be spent. Your economic system is crucial. This governs whether your country operates on principles of mercantilism, isolationism, or free trade, among others. Income tax determines which pop should be taxed and what range of tax burden is appropriate. No income tax at all is, of course, an option. Very cool. And legislation to such an effect will make some pops both rich and happy. Poll taxation or levying a fixed tax per head is another option primarily used in less industrialized societies. Very, very unequal taxation right there. There are other avenues of taxation as well, but these are the ones driven by legislation. Finally, you can choose, I assume the other avenues are primarily import taxes, export taxes, something like that. I have to assume that that is what is meant primarily. Finally, you can choose what form the institutions of colonization, policing, education system, and health system will take in your country. For example, you can keep government spending under control by instituting charity hospitals, which have limited effect, and boost the power of the clergy, or you could pass a public health insurance law, which is costlier but can have a greater impact on the health of the masses. Payroll taxes require reasonable lower-class wages and a centralized population to pay off, but if so can form the economic basis for a budding welfare system as seen here. A tax system based on levying might be more lucrative in countries with huge peasant populations. So, let's look at this. Mercantilism, so this is still fairly early. This is a very traditional form of doing business, you know, goes back all the way to what, like the 17th or 16th century, maybe even further, honestly. But as we look at it, you know, of course, this is something that was abandoned by most, especially the European countries. Payroll tax, so fairly traditional. Poll tax, no poll tax. No colonial affairs, local police force, religious schools, and private health insurance has been established. Basically what we have right here is something where they finance this by then saying we do a very, very basic health system. And with the religious schools, of course, you give a lot of power to the clergy as it stands. Now, you could have, you know, I don't know actually whether this, let me take a look at this. Charity hospitals. This doesn't strike me. Charity hospitals, you think this is just a result of the health system, so that it pops up as an institution rather than an economic law? I'm not sure about that, but either way that is implemented there is nice. This definitely sounds like the church would be involved, though, you know, very much the church, unless you are not a secularized country to any degree. The church is, of course, not part of government. Human rights. Enshrining the rights of the individual was a hallmark of the era. These laws define how your pops are treated and what manner of control you can enforce over their lives. Free speech determines the degree of control you can enforce over your interest groups, but restrictive rights throttle the spread of innovation. The labor rights laws include outlawing serfdom, but extends all the way to establishing a workplace safety institution to reduce the numbers of people literally crushed in the jaws of industry. Children's rights and the rights of women have a number of effects, such as shifting the workforce dependent demographics, which is very cool, affecting dependent income, and extending the franchise. Welfare ensures the poor and disabled in your society are taken care of. Migration laws can be used to influence pop migration. Slavery laws determine the legal status of owning people in your country. More details on that subject in a future dev diary. Yeah, right here, we got the right of assembly, pretty good. Serfdom abolished, pretty good. Child labor allowed, well, classic, I guess. It was very, very normal back in the day, of course. Legal guardianship is, I have to assume, yeah, so essentially, the man is the legal guardian of the woman in a household. No social security, Jesus. No migration controls. Oh, this is the, I mean, it's not necessarily healthcare. Welfare is just a, that's a bit of a broad one, right? Welfare could be split into like, I mean, this is already the health system, but I feel like they should be maybe closer together. I know that they basically have 7 subcategories for each category here. So for the basic power structure for the economy and for the human rights, but I feel like those belong a bit together. In Victoria 2, they were structured together basically as well. Then migration, no migration controls, and slavery is banned. So all in all, honestly, a pretty acceptable country. It almost reads, this could be Bavaria. Like, many countries were like this, don't get me wrong here. But, like, looking at this, we had serfdom abolished, honestly, I don't know when. Was it 1815? Was it during Napoleon's power? Like, when the Rhine Confederacy was founded? I think that could be when serfdom was abolished. This basically reads like it could be Bavaria in the whole, though, at the time. Although I'm not sure about the right of assembly. We may have been a bit more restrictive. Laws are almost always completely independent from one another. You can create a constitutional monarchy with hereditary succession, but universal suffrage, or an autocratic presidential republic with a strongman leader at the top of the food chain. You can have a secret police and still permit fully protected speech. That is pretty cool. I generally like what we've seen here in the law, so let's just recapitulate this here in a second. I really think that what we're seeing here is quite nice. There are some questions in particular to the cultural exclusion, in particular to the welfare system, but there is of course something here on top of this that is the institution topic that we know nothing about, and in that case I just have to say we need to wait, because that will of course also be covered in a dev diary. So basically I want to see how institutions play into the role of laws, how I can influence institutions, and what exactly they mean in any way. So yeah, basically I like what we have here. I think this one is also prone to waste a bit of space at the very least. I mean, yeah, I don't know, man. There's some of these UI decisions are basically, I understand, they want to be fairly clean. You know, this is a very clean thing. It just shows you the general thing, then what you have, and then how many options you have. But like, if you cut it off right here, and just like put like a divider in here, right? And then have the option number next to it, you can save so much space. It isn't as bad, nearly as bad as what we've seen before, but still, I hope you know where I'm coming from. For example, the US starts with a total separation of church and state, ensuring no pops suffer legal discrimination on account of their religion, while Sardinia-Piedmont doesn't take kindly to non-Catholic pops. Yep, that was the classic difference. That is why so much migration happened into the US, for example, and into the New World in general. This will affect pops who live in the country currently, but will also limit which pops might migrate there. Few pops would make it their preference to move to a country where they are mistreated by law. As a result of these starting laws, Sardinia-Piedmont might have to look towards colonization or conquest if they start to run out of their native workforce, while North America is likely to get regular migration waves to help expand the frontier. By connecting these effects to starting laws, many historically appropriate and recognizable aspects and behaviors of Victoria-era nations, such as their attractiveness to migrants, are connected to a tangible property. For example, poor or oppressed pops emigrating to the USA both because of its demand for workforce and also its liberal laws, rather than being arbitrarily encoded into the very fabric of the nation itself, the approach previous Victoria games took to encourage history in the familiar direction. Yeah, it did still play a role. If you were not a liberal country, if you were very much repressive in the New World in Victoria 2, your migration would suffer. But basically, if you were in the New World, you were just getting pops. Okay, you would just get flooded. This is definitely a thing. So I like that they took a bit of a different approach here. I think that is significantly better over the laws in Victoria 2. When it comes to that, or rather over the influence of the laws in Victoria 2. But yeah, we will see how this actually plays out based on the policies, based on the decrees, based on the institutions. A common effect of laws is to modify some parameter about your country, like give you more authority or reduce certain pops' mortality. Yeah, we can see basically what is written there. We can see it right here. You can see which factions approve. I assume the workers and the intelligentsia. Then right here we have the church and the industrialists disapproving, and this is the public schools policy. This is part of our laws, unlocks a new law and a new decree, so yeah, enables the education institution. Public schools is providing education with plus 30% education access and disallowed by state religion law in church and state. So basically, if you're a state religion, then you can't have public schools, you need to have religious schools. They can even alter the effect of other parts in your society, like boost the efficacy? Honestly, I'm not sure of your education system institution. Without some degree of separation between church and state, this form of secular school system is not possible, of course. Another reason to change laws is basically your people demand it. As we touched on in the previous dev diary, interest groups have ideologies that lead them to favor some laws over others. For example, the industrialists have the individualist ideology that causes them to favor privately operated education and healthcare systems over publicly funded ones, to ensure best access is given to those of merit and morals, or in other words, wealth. Reforming your current laws to work more in accordance with your powerful interest group's ideologies is a quick way to win their approval, permitting you more leeway to go against their wishes in the future, or as a quick pick-me-up in case their standard of living has recently taken a hit. Basically, if somebody becomes very, very poor, you can say, hey, but at least you got some rights. Even trade unionists have a hard time saying no to zero income taxing, but even that won't make up for restricting the vote. This one is an interesting interface. I think this one works just fine, but I also think that you can basically cut this entire thing out. Like, you can just take this away, and then you just have this text. And even here, I would like it better if all of these basically laws would start at the same level so that, you can tell better. Either way, approves of presidential republic, of course, strongly approves of no income tax, disapproves of the per capita tax, approves of public schools, disapproves of no healthcare system, approves of right of assembly, and disapproves of the child labor allowed and no social security. It makes a lot of sense. Honestly, what I am the most worried about when it comes to interest groups is that they need to make sense, because then you don't constantly need to check what they like or dislike. You will simply know. It makes sense that trade unions don't want their children to work. They want to earn enough so that the children don't have to work, right? Makes a lot of sense. I do hope that this is something that is true for all of the interest groups, but we will have to see. Yeah, honestly, going back on this again, I really want to stress... you can see it here as well. This is pretty cool. So this is basically like an opinion modifier in CK3. Trade union disapproves of the recent change from census suffrage to landed voting. But once this goes back, I assume, once this runs out, this modifier, it's just going to be a normal thing right here in the landed voting. But for the moment, of course, they are outraged. It is a day-to-day political topic. I like it. But to go back on it, again, I really want to stress that... oh man, I really would like to see exactly how this works with institutions. But also, primarily, I really, really want to stress as well that the cultural exclusion, I would like to know how granular and how modular this decision can be. Enacting a law is far from instantaneous, one-click affair. First off, any reform must be supported by at least one interest group in your government who can champion the change. Once the reform is begun, it can be a smooth process that's over in a matter of months, or it can take years of grueling debate in parliament or horse trading between interest groups in order to pass. The amount of time it takes depends both on your government legitimacy in the eyes of the people and also on the clout of the interest group in your government that supports and opposes the new law relative to the new one to the one it is replacing. So this is related directly to the parties in government. This is important. Of course, you need a majority, and your government should have a majority, right? So this makes a lot of sense, but they have to broker within. Some people may not know this, but there are many coalition governments, even today in Europe in particular, but also in many, many other parts of the world. And of course, they need to coordinate, they need to talk about this, even in a two-party system, such as, I mean, it's not technically one, but it really is one in the US. You still need to, persuade the wings of your party that they need to vote for something that you put or want to enact. So this makes a lot of sense. The amount of time it takes depends on both your government. Right, we already read that. While broader coalitions of interest groups in government give you more options of laws to enact, it also complicates getting them passed, because it will then take longer for the groups that, are against it to say or to be persuaded and so on. Changing your laws isn't an entirely straightforward process in Victoria 3. In this case, it's just a matter of time before the law is enacted, but if dissenting interest groups had also been part of this government, there would be plenty of room for debate and stalling tactics that could cause this reform to take more effort than it's worth. I am interested in what that looks like, these actual stalling tactics. So you can see right here, there's a tiny image. Sadly, it doesn't exist earlier, or rather bigger. But you can see in August this will pass, so that's pretty fast after the game start. We have a success of 42.8%, so this is... Okay, this sounds stupid, okay? But it's basically like a siege. So this will advance, at a chance of 57.1%, and it will even succeed with a chance of 42.8%. It's like a siege, it's like plotting in CK3. I think that's basically what this is. It could also have a negative modifier if, the defending side, so the negative side, was a bit stronger. Then you could have a debate that would slow it down. You could have a stalling that could slow it down. I hope there are events attached to that. I hope there is something like that going on. It would be interesting to see the parliamentary life come to life, right? That is something that is a bit, I think, lackluster in Victoria 2. Primarily, you had these events that, hey, we have an election. Which one do you want to reinforce? Like the primary ideology, which pop do you want to please, and so on and so forth. Where do you want to gain consciousness or militancy? It was number shuffling. I want more, like, actual involvement of the parliament as it is in events. Pops have a profession, collect an income, and consume goods depending on the economic preconditions you have created in their country. Of course, pops are a part of these interest groups. These material concerns, in combination with a few others, such as literacy, determine which interest groups they support. Other aspects, such as your country's law, influence how much political strength the pop provide to those interest groups. The interest groups have an approval score and favor certain laws over others. As a result, different groups of pops approve more or less of the society that you have built depending on their economic well-being, and their demands for change is more or less intimidating depending on how many and strong they are. I don't think, I maintain this opinion, I do not believe not having political parties is good. You have a lot of movement towards political parties in many countries at the time of this game. At the start of the game, they don't necessarily exist everywhere. China, for example, has the court factions, Japan doesn't have parties, and so on. So, obviously, interest groups are good, but I think political parties need to be added. But what I will say, something that I have come to when it comes to conclusions just after thinking about this game, is the fact that having interest groups changes very, very little about how political power moves compared to how it moved in Victoria 2, but it makes it more readable. Knowing who joins a political influence group makes it very, very easy for you to just say, I need to improve this person's life, and then they will be happier with my society and will be more approving of it. Having interest groups makes it so that you can now deal with it on two levels. You can either bribe, you can work with the interest groups, you can change them, you can suppress them, you can influence them, or you change the population that stands behind the interest groups to, for example, marginalize them. If you make it so that, you know, the population changes and pivots towards other interest groups, one interest group that has interests that you don't approve of will fall away. They will grow weaker, that you can ignore them, right? I think that is a very, very valuable addition compared to the... It's not mysterious, it's fairly simple to see through once you understand it, but you need to take a look at this from a perspective of Victoria 2, where again, it was, you still had this connection between the pops and what is going on in Parliament, that much is true, but it was pretty disconnected. You would primarily be working with your pops, you would primarily be looking at that, you would primarily be working with political reforms to influence your pops, but not to influence your parties, and sometimes... If a party just had bad policies, everyone that wanted just free trade and everyone that wanted no subsidies, for example, then you couldn't commit to that ideology. And that was based on a per-country basis, because those things could never change. If we can have this but changing in Victoria 3, where you can influence the pops or the interest groups, and you can succeed in either way or in both ways, I think that is far, far superior to Victoria 2. I just really wanted to say that. I think that... Again, I personally believe political parties being not present, and they are being worked on, but them being not present initially is bad. I think that's a very bad thing. But I do think interest groups are definitely a step up to what we had in Victoria 2. And I'm a big fan of it. I think they really crystallize where these things, how these things went, and how you can read the situation. How you know which section of your society is happy, which ones are unhappy, and which ones are strong and which ones are not strong. You could read that in Victoria 2, but as many other things, it was rather... it appeared rather mysterious, despite not being mysterious. Now, that's all for me this week in this dev diary. I mentioned institutions a number of times, and next Thursday I will be back with more details on this powerful society shaping tool. Until then, I'm hyped for that. I really, really want to learn about institutions to fully understand how they intermingle with society and how they intermingle with the laws. And now let's check. I don't know whether there are any, but if I'm not mistaken here... Oh, this isn't the... Oh no, nope. I want the... Please, I want the developer answers. You can't hide from me. I don't think there were developer answers when I was looking at this. Just give me a second here. Show only dev responses. Let's read this. It sounds like every law change will have to be initiated by the player. Wouldn't this lead to bizarre situations like being able to play the whole game with the liberals in the government without passing a simple liberal law? You initiate passing laws, but that doesn't mean interest groups or pops won't demand certain laws and get angry if you do nothing. Yeah, I get the concern here of Muhu. You do initiate it, but if you don't initiate it, you're going to have rebellions, you're going to have certain interest groups fall away from you, and so on and so forth. So I actually like that. Ooh, this is the only response. Thank you, Wiz. More on this system later. That's exciting. Honestly, okay, we're going to end it here. Man, we are 1.5 hours after this dev diary was published and only one dev response. Now, I actually am really interested in this now. More on this system later. Social uprisings and rebel groups, or groups that could become rebels, were so one-dimensional. Well, two-dimensional, technically, in Victoria 2. It was bad. I am excited to learn about the system. I personally wholeheartedly believe. I think CK3 does some interesting stuff. It doesn't do it perfectly to any degree. I think Stellaris does some interesting stuff, but it is all ignorable when it comes to the factions in your realm. I hope that Victoria 3 brings something new to the table of how revolution, rebellion, and just dissent should work. But that's it from me today. Man, this was a long one. 44 minutes. Oh my. I hope I see you next week. If you got any questions, if you got any input, if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. I will be reading all of them. I will be addressing them in the next video if I find stuff that was a really good case. If you make a good case, I always love it, even if you disagree with me, so just let me know about it. But for the moment, I would simply like to thank the members of the channel, namely the Barons, the Counts, and the Dukes. I am done for today, my god, and I will see all of you later, alligator.